most of the ocean has never seen daylight. Not rarely, not occasionally, at noon on a clear day. Never, not once, not for the entire history of the planet, in the vast majority of the water covering it. Tonight, we're going down, past the sunlight, past the twilight, into the quiet, folded corners of the ocean where most of Earth's actual living space exists. Cold, dark, patient, and stranger than almost anywhere else we've ever managed to look. You don't need to hold your breath for any of it. Just sink slowly and let each quiet corner drift by. Let's start at the surface, where the light still reaches for now. The line where daylight simply gives up. Sunlight doesn't switch off in the ocean. It fades gradually and disappears far sooner than most people expect. Enough light for photosynthesis to occur only reaches down to around 200 meters, a layer oceanographers call the epipelagic, or sunlight, zone, home to the vast majority of marine life most people picture: coral reefs, sea turtles, dolphins, the shallow blue water of postcards. Below that, from roughly 200 to 1,000 meters, lies the mesopelagic, or twilight, zone, where a faint, dim blue glow persists, just barely, but not nearly enough for plants or algae to grow. Past 1,000 meters, that last trace of sunlight finally completely gives out, beginning the aphotic, or midnight, zone, a region of complete and total darkness that continues, uninterrupted, all the way to the deepest trenches on Earth. By volume, the sunlit zone most of us picture when we think ocean makes up only a small fraction of the ocean's total space. The overwhelming majority of the ocean, and, by extension, the overwhelming majority of Earth's entire livable space, more than every rainforest, desert, and grassland on land combined, exists in permanent, total darkness. Somewhere below the last sunbeam you've ever seen underwater, an entire world just keeps going, patiently, without ever once needing the light at all. The dark has a schedule of its own. Every single day, without exception, something enormous moves through it. The largest migration on Earth, and it happens every night. Every evening, as the sun sets, an enormous number of small fish, shrimp, jellyfish, and other creatures living in the ocean's twilight zone begin swimming upward toward the surface under cover of darkness. This event, called diel vertical migration, is now understood to be the largest synchronized movement of biomass on the entire planet, larger by far than any migration of birds, wildebeest, or any other animal on land, happening quietly, invisibly, in the ocean every single night. The logic behind it is a careful trade-off. Near the surface at night, food, mostly tiny plankton, nourished by daytime sunlight, is far more abundant. But traveling there in daylight would expose these small creatures to far more visual predators. So they wait for darkness, rise to feed under its cover, and descend again before sunrise, retreating to the safety of deeper, darker water. This migration is significant enough that it was first detected not by biologists, but by naval sonar operators during the Second World War, who noticed a mysterious, moving layer that reflected sound waves at a shifting depth, rising each night and sinking each morning, initially assumed to be some kind of false ocean floor, before being identified as a living, moving mass of countless small animals instead. Every night, an entire ocean's worth of small lives rises quietly toward the surface, and returns just as quietly before morning, a tide of its own, made entirely of creatures instead of water. Rising through the dark takes a kind of quiet courage. Some creatures down there have found an even stranger way to cope with it. They simply make their own light. Most of the ocean's life makes its own light. In the ocean's darker layers, an enormous share of animals, by some estimates, the majority of species living below the sunlit zone, can produce their own light, a phenomenon called bioluminescence. The light is produced through a chemical reaction, typically involving a light-emitting molecule called luciferin reacting with oxygen, catalyzed by an enzyme called luciferase, a process that produces almost no heat, making it, by some measures, dramatically more energy efficient than an ordinary incandescent light bulb. Creatures use this light for remarkably different purposes. Some, like certain species of squid, use it defensively, releasing a glowing cloud to startle or confuse a predator, the deep-sea version of an ink cloud. Others use faint, rippling patterns along their bodies to communicate or attract mates in total darkness, where any other kind of visual signal would be completely invisible. Some small deep-sea shrimp go further still, actually vomiting a burst of glowing chemical fluid directly at a threat, essentially throwing light at whatever's chasing them, in the hope that the resulting glow will attract something even larger to their pursuer's location instead. Down where the sun has never once reached, an entire silent language of light still quietly flickers on, built not from sunlight borrowed from somewhere else, but from a light each creature learned, somehow, to make entirely for itself. Some creatures use their light to hide. One uses it, very deliberately, to invite something closer. The fishing rod growing out of a fish's head. Deep-sea anglerfish are among the most recognizable residents of the ocean's dark zones, largely thanks to one striking feature: a thin, flexible spine growing from the front of the head, tipped with a small, glowing lure. That glow comes not from the fish itself, but from colonies of bioluminescent bacteria living symbiotically within the lure. The anglerfish provides shelter and nutrients, and in exchange, the bacteria provide a convincing, wriggling light source that resembles small prey, drawing curious fish close enough for the anglerfish's genuinely enormous hinge-like jaw to strike. Anglerfish are ambush predators by necessity as much as strategy. Food is scarce in the deep ocean, and actively chasing prey burns precious energy that might not be replaced for a long time. A lure that brings dinner directly to a fish that barely has to move is a remarkably efficient solution to a genuinely difficult problem. Most anglerfish species have also evolved a stomach capable of expanding dramatically, allowing them to swallow prey substantially larger than their own body, a useful trait when the next meal, after a long, dark, patient wait, might not come along again for quite some time. A small light dangled patiently in the dark, waiting for something curious enough to come and see what it is. One of the oldest tricks in nature, quietly perfected at the bottom of the sea. That patient lure is only half the anglerfish's story. What happens when it finds a mate is even stranger. The mate that fuses permanently and never lets go. Finding a mate in the vast, dark, sparsely populated deep ocean is a genuine challenge, and some anglerfish species have evolved one of the strangest reproductive solutions found anywhere in the animal kingdom to solve it. In several deep-sea anglerfish species, males are dramatically smaller than females, sometimes just a fraction of her size, and cannot feed independently as adults at all. Instead, upon finding a female, a male bites into her body and simply never lets go. Over time, his tissue gradually fuses with hers. His circulatory system connects directly to her bloodstream, and he begins receiving nutrients directly from her body in exchange for providing a permanent, always available source of sperm whenever she's ready to reproduce. His own eyes, fins, and most internal organs no longer needed, gradually degrade and disappear until what remains is little more than a small, permanently attached pair of reproductive organs. Some females have been found with multiple males fused to their bodies at once, a permanent built-in mating pool carried along for the rest of her life. This strategy, called sexual parasitism, solves a genuine problem. In an environment this dark and this empty, finding a mate even once might be difficult enough that letting go is simply too great a risk to take. An entire relationship reduced to its most essential function and made permanent, not out of romance, but out of the sheer, practical loneliness of the deep, dark water surrounding them both. Some ocean creatures wait for a mate for a lifetime. Others were, for most of human history, barely believed to exist at all. The Giant That Went Unfilmed for 100 years of cinema. For centuries, sailors told stories of enormous sea monsters capable of dragging ships beneath the waves. Tales long dismissed as exaggeration or superstition, until dead and partially decomposed specimens began washing ashore, confirming that something genuinely massive really did live in the deep ocean. The giant squid, which can grow to over 40 feet in length, including its long feeding tentacles, remained almost entirely unphotographed alive in its natural deep-sea habitat for the entire 20th century, an animal large enough to have inspired centuries of myth, and yet, remarkably, never once captured on camera in the wild, despite enormous cinematic and technological advances happening everywhere else in that same period. That finally changed in September 2004, when Japanese researchers, using a baited camera rig, captured the first images ever taken of a live giant squid in its natural deep-sea habitat. The first video footage of a live giant squid swimming freely didn't arrive until 2012, when a research team finally filmed one near Japan using specialized deep-sea camera technology and a lure designed to mimic bioluminescent jellyfish. Even now, sightings of live giant squid remain exceedingly rare. Most of what's known about the species still comes from examining specimens that wash ashore dead or are occasionally caught accidentally in deep-sea fishing nets, rather than from direct observation in the wild. An animal large enough to have shaped centuries of legend, living an entire life just out of sight, genuinely real the whole time, simply better than almost anything else on Earth, and never quite letting itself be seen. The giant squid finally got its photograph. Its even larger, even stranger relative still mostly hasn't. The squid with eyes the size of dinner plates. Even less understood than the giant squid is a close but distinct relative found in the frigid waters around Antarctica, the colossal squid, which may be even heavier, though generally somewhat shorter in overall length. Colossal squid possess the largest eyes documented in the entire animal kingdom, estimated to reach up to around 11 inches across in the largest specimens, roughly the size of a dinner plate, likely an adaptation for detecting the faint bioluminescent glow of prey or predators like sperm whales in the pitch-black water they inhabit. Unlike the giant squid's simple hooked tentacle suckers, colossal squid tentacles are lined with sharp, rotating hooks, some with small, swiveling claws, giving them an even more formidable set of tools for capturing prey in the deep, cold water they call home. To date, no live adult colossal squid has ever been filmed in its natural deep-sea habitat. Nearly everything scientists know about the species comes from a small number of specimens recovered from the stomachs of sperm whales, or occasionally pulled up, dead or dying, in fishing nets from extreme depths, meaning an animal potentially larger than the giant squid remains, in a very real sense, even more of a mystery. Somewhere in the cold, black water below Antarctica, an animal with eyes the size of dinner plates has been watching the dark for longer than anyone has ever managed to watch it back. One giant hides from the light entirely. Another giant, the ocean's deepest diving hunter, chases its meals straight down into it. The whale that hunts by sound in total darkness. Sperm whales are the largest of the toothed whales and among the deepest diving mammals on Earth, regularly descending to depths of around 2,000 meters or more in search of prey, including, on occasion, giant and colossal squid. At those depths, there's no usable light at all, so sperm whales hunt almost entirely by sound, using a biological sonar system called echolocation. They produce powerful clicking sounds using a specialized structure in their massive heads called the spermacety organ, then listen for the returning echoes to build a detailed picture of their surroundings and locate prey purely through sound. A single dive can last upward of an hour or more, sustained by a remarkable set of physiological adaptations. An unusually high concentration of oxygen-storing proteins in their blood and muscle tissue, a dramatically slowed heart rate while diving, and the ability to collapse their lungs safely under the extreme pressure of the deep ocean, rather than risking the kind of injury that pressure would cause a human diver. The scars often found on sperm whales' skin, sometimes in circular patterns matching a squid's suckers, offer some of the only physical evidence of these deep, dark encounters, violent, prolonged struggles that take place far below where any human has ever directly witnessed one occur. A hunt conducted entirely by sound, in a darkness so complete that even the hunter has never actually seen its own prey clearly, just heard it, felt it, and, somehow, found it anyway. Sperm whales dive deep to hunt. Further down still, past where any whale can follow, the ocean floor itself starts doing something even stranger. The vents where life doesn't need the sun at all. In 1977, scientists exploring the deep ocean floor near the Galapagos Islands in a submersible made a discovery that fundamentally changed biology's understanding of what life requires. Thriving ecosystems clustered around cracks in the seafloor called hydrothermal vents in water far too deep and dark for any sunlight to ever reach. These vents form where seawater seeps into cracks in the ocean floor, gets superheated by magma far below, and rushes back out again, carrying dissolved minerals and chemicals, particularly hydrogen sulfide, a compound toxic to most life on the surface, but which certain specialized bacteria at these vents can actually use as an energy source. This process, called chemosynthesis, allows these bacteria to produce energy-rich organic compounds without any sunlight at all, functioning much like plants do through photosynthesis, but built entirely around chemistry instead of light. These bacteria form the base of an entire food web, supporting tubeworms, clams, crabs, and other organisms found nowhere else on Earth, all ultimately surviving on chemical energy from inside the planet itself, rather than energy from the sun 93 million miles away. The discovery was so unexpected that it directly reshaped scientific thinking about where else in the universe life might be able to exist, including, notably, renewed interest in the icy subsurface oceans of moons like Jupiter's Europa, which may have similar hydrothermal activity of their own, far from any sun at all. An entire independent form of life, quietly thriving at the bottom of the ocean, built on nothing but heat and chemistry, proof that even total darkness was never quite the same thing as total emptiness. Some vents release warm, mineral-rich water gently. Others release something closer to underwater smoke. The chimneys that breathe black smoke underwater. Some of the most dramatic hydrothermal vents form tall, chimney-like mineral structures, some rising more than 50 feet from the ocean floor, releasing plumes of water so dark with dissolved minerals that they're commonly called black smokers. The water flowing from these particular vents can reach extraordinary temperatures, sometimes exceeding 700 degrees Fahrenheit, yet it doesn't boil, because the immense pressure at these depths raises water's boiling point dramatically above what it would be at the surface. As this superheated, mineral-saturated water meets the near-freezing water of the surrounding deep ocean, dissolved metals and minerals rapidly precipitate out, forming the dark, smoke-like plume and gradually building up the chimney structure itself, layer by layer, sometimes growing several feet taller in just a matter of months. These structures can also collapse and rebuild repeatedly over time as pressure and mineral flow shift, and some black smoker fields have been found to host entirely unique species found nowhere else on the planet, adapted specifically to this narrow, scalding, mineral-rich band of water sandwiched between the vent's extreme heat and the crushing cold surrounding it. Underwater chimneys, breathing dark mineral smoke into freezing black water hot enough to have boiled instantly anywhere else on Earth, quietly building themselves taller, one plume at a time, in a place no chimney was ever meant to exist at all. Some creatures thrive right beside the extreme heat. One kind has given up something most animals can't live without at all. The worm with no mouth and no stomach. Clustered around many hydrothermal vents are giant tube worms, some growing over 8 feet long, living inside tough white tubes anchored directly to the seafloor near the vent's warm, mineral-rich water. As adults, these worms have no mouth, no stomach, and no digestive system of any kind, a genuinely startling fact for an animal that size. Instead, a specialized internal organ houses trillions of the same chemosynthetic bacteria found more loosely around the vents, living in a permanent, direct partnership with the worm's own tissue. The worm's distinctive red plume, extended from the top of its tube into the passing water, absorbs oxygen, hydrogen sulfide, and carbon dioxide directly from the water, delivering them through its bloodstream to the bacteria housed inside. In exchange, the bacteria convert these raw chemicals into nutrients the worm can absorb directly, entirely bypassing the need to eat, digest, or process food in any conventional sense at all. This arrangement is so complete and so specialized that these worms can grow remarkably quickly for a deep-sea organism, some studies suggesting growth rates far faster than most other deep-sea life, entirely fueled by a partnership with organisms too small to see with the naked eye. An animal that gave up eating entirely and thrived anyway, trusting its whole existence to a colony of bacteria smaller than a grain of sand, living quietly inside it. Some ocean life thrives on chemistry near an underwater chimney. Some thrives on something far grimmer and far more generous than it sounds. The death that feeds a community for decades. When a great whale dies far from shore, its body doesn't simply drift to the seafloor and disappear. It becomes the foundation of an entire temporary ecosystem called a whale fall that can sustain deep sea life for decades. The process unfolds in distinct stages. First, mobile scavengers, sleeper sharks, hagfish, various crustaceans strip away the soft tissue, a phase that alone can take many months given the sheer scale of a whale carcass reaching the seafloor largely intact. Next comes an enrichment opportunist stage. As smaller worms and crustaceans move into the sediment surrounding the skeleton, now enriched with organic matter, finally, in a stage that can last for decades, specialized bacteria break down lipids stored deep within the whale's bones themselves, releasing hydrogen sulfide that supports its own small chemosynthetic ecosystem. Remarkably similar in principle to the hydrothermal vent communities from earlier tonight, running instead on the slow chemical decay of a single skeleton. Researchers have identified entire species that appear to depend specifically on whale falls to complete their life cycle, including certain worms that seem to exist almost nowhere else, an entire specialized ecological niche built around an event that, for any one particular patch of seafloor, might only happen once in a great while, if ever at all. Even in death, something that large gives the ocean floor decades of quiet, patient life. An ending that, down there, in the dark, behaves an awful lot like a beginning instead. A whale's ending can quietly become a beginning for others. One small creature figured out how to make that trick work for itself directly. The jellyfish that can reverse its own aging. A small jellyfish species called Turritopsis dohrnii, found in oceans around the world, has a genuine biological ability that's earned it the nickname the immortal jellyfish. Under certain conditions, particularly stress, injury, or starvation, it can revert its adult body back into its earliest juvenile life stage. Most jellyfish begin life as a small, plant-like polyp attached to the seafloor, before eventually transforming into the free-swimming adult form most people picture. Turritopsis dohrnii, when threatened, can reverse this entire process, its specialized adult cells transforming back into a more general, flexible cell type, and the whole organism essentially restarting its life cycle from the polyp stage all over again. This doesn't make the species literally immortal in any simple sense. Individuals remain just as vulnerable to being eaten by predators or killed by disease as any other jellyfish. What it means, more precisely, is that this particular species appears to have found a genuine biological escape hatch from old age itself, a trick that in principle it could repeat indefinitely under the right conditions. Scientists studying this process are genuinely interested in what it might eventually reveal about cellular aging more broadly, though practical applications for human aging remain, for now, a very distant and uncertain prospect rather than anything close to reality. A creature smaller than your fingernail, quietly holding one of the only known real answers to a question people have been asking for the entirety of recorded history. One creature learned to reverse time itself. Another simply learned never to freeze, in water cold enough that almost nothing else survives it. The fish with antifreeze instead of red blood. In the frigid waters surrounding Antarctica, a family of fish called icefish have evolved two extraordinary adaptations found nowhere else among vertebrate animals. They produce their own natural antifreeze, and their blood is completely colorless, lacking red blood cells almost entirely. Icefish blood contains specialized glycoprotein molecules that bind to tiny forming ice crystals, preventing them from growing large enough to cause fatal cellular damage. A genuine biological antifreeze, allowing these fish to survive comfortably in water hovering right around the freezing point of seawater, colder than the blood of almost any other fish on Earth could tolerate. Even stranger, icefish are the only known adult vertebrates that survive without functional red blood cells or the oxygen-carrying protein hemoglobin most animals depend on entirely. Instead, they rely on oxygen dissolved directly in their blood plasma, made possible by the extremely cold water's ability to hold far more dissolved oxygen than warmer water can, combined with an unusually large heart and blood volume that helps compensate for the far less efficient oxygen transport this system provides. Researchers believe this bloodless-seeming adaptation evolved gradually over millions of years as Antarctic waters grew progressively colder, favoring fish that could tolerate an increasingly extreme and specific environment, an entire evolutionary strategy built quietly around giving something up rather than gaining something new. A fish swimming, right now, through water cold enough to freeze almost anything else solid, kept alive by blood that looks, quite literally, like nothing at all. Icefish adapted to survive extreme cold. One deep-sea creature adapted to survive an environment almost every other animal actively avoids. The vampire that isn't actually a vampire at all. Deep in the ocean's oxygen minimum zone, a band of water, typically between 600 and 900 meters down, where dissolved oxygen levels drop dramatically low, lives a small, dark, gelatinous creature called the vampire squid. Despite its dramatic name, given for its dark, cape-like webbing between its arms, the vampire squid is neither a true vampire nor, technically, a true squid at all. It belongs to its own distinct order, sitting in an evolutionary category somewhere between squid and octopus, with no particularly close living relatives. Its most remarkable adaptation is metabolic. The vampire squid can survive and remain active in oxygen levels so low they would be fatal to most other animals thanks to an unusually efficient respiratory system and a notably low metabolic rate for an active predator, allowing it to comfortably occupy a stretch of deep water that most larger predators simply can't tolerate for long. Rather than actively hunting, vampire squid feed primarily on marine detritus, a slow, steady drift of decaying organic material, sometimes called marine snow, falling gently from the more populated waters above, gathered using a pair of long, sticky filaments rather than the aggressive tentacle-based hunting more commonly associated with true squid. A creature with a fearsome name, living quietly and gently in a stretch of water almost nothing else can survive in, feeding patiently on whatever the ocean above happens to let fall. Some creatures adapt to what's missing in the water around them. One adapted its entire face around what it needs to see. The fish with a see-through head. The barreleye fish, found in the ocean's twilight zone, has one of the strangest heads of any animal on Earth, a transparent, fluid-filled dome through which its two barrel-shaped tubular eyes are clearly visible from outside. For decades after its initial discovery, scientists assumed the barreleye's eyes were fixed in place, permanently pointed straight upward to spot the silhouettes of prey passing overhead against the faint light still filtering down from above. It wasn't until 2009 that researchers studying a live specimen in a research submersible confirmed something unexpected. those eyes can actually rotate freely within the transparent dome, allowing the fish to look forward as well as upward, depending on what it's tracking. The transparent shield covering its head is believed to serve a protective function, allowing the eyes to safely rotate and swivel while remaining shielded from the stinging tentacles of siphonophores, jellyfish-like colonial organisms the barreleye is thought to steal food from, sneaking bits of prey caught in the siphonophores' tentacles without getting stung in the process. What appear in older photographs to be the fish's eyes are actually its nostrils. The true eyes are the two green dome-shaped structures visible glowing faintly within the transparent head itself, a detail so easy to misread that it confused observers for years after the species was first properly documented. A fish that quite literally sees the world through the top of its own transparent skull, built patiently around a single specific need: to always be looking exactly where the next meal might appear. Some creatures adapt their eyes to the deep. Others simply grow far larger than their shallow water relatives ever do. Why some deep-sea creatures grow so much bigger than their relatives? Certain deep-sea species grow dramatically larger than their closest shallow water relatives, a well-documented pattern researchers call deep-sea gigantism, seen in creatures like the giant isopod, a deep ocean relative of the small pillbugs found in ordinary garden soil, but capable of growing over a foot long. Several theories attempt to explain this pattern, and researchers believe multiple factors likely combine rather than any single one fully explaining it. Colder deep-sea temperatures tend to slow metabolism and extend lifespan, and animals that simply live longer often have more time to keep gradually growing, a principle observed across many cold water species regardless of depth. Higher pressure at depth may also play a role in some species, along with reduced predation pressure in certain deep environments, allowing larger, slower-growing individuals to survive to a size that might make them too conspicuous or vulnerable in busier, shallower waters. Food scarcity likely factors in too. In an environment where meals are rare and unpredictable, a larger body allows for greater fat and energy storage, letting an animal survive longer stretches between feeding opportunities than a smaller relative could manage on the same infrequent supply of food drifting down from above. Down where food is scarce and the cold slows everything else down, some of the ocean's smallest, most unremarkable relatives have simply, patiently been given the time and the room to grow. Some creatures grow strange and large in the deep. One was thought to have gone extinct millions of years before humans ever existed at all. The fish that was supposed to have died out with the dinosaurs. Based on the fossil record, scientists believed a group of fish called coelacanths had gone extinct roughly 66 million years ago, around the same time as the non-avian dinosaurs, until, in December 1938, a museum curator in South Africa named Marjorie Courtney Latimer noticed an unusual fish among a fishing trawler's catch and recognized it as something she'd never seen before. The fish was identified as a living coelacanth, a species presumed extinct for tens of millions of years, alive and largely unchanged in body structure, caught quite by accident off the South African coast. It remains one of the most famous rediscoveries in the entire history of zoology, sometimes described as a living fossil, since its basic body plan has changed remarkably little over an immense span of geological time. A second, genetically distinct coelacanth population was later discovered off the coast of Indonesia in the late 1990s, confirming that at least two separate living species had quietly survived undetected by science, in deep coastal waters for the entire span of recorded human history and well beyond it. Coelacanths typically live in deep, dark caves and crevices during the day, emerging at night to hunt, which likely helped them go unnoticed by humans for so long, despite living in relatively accessible coastal waters rather than the truly remote deep ocean. An entire branch of the evolutionary tree that everyone had confidently marked extinct, still swimming quietly through underwater caves the whole time, waiting patiently for one unusual catch to finally set the record straight. Some creatures survived by staying hidden. All of them, hidden or not, have to survive one thing the deep ocean never lets up on: the crushing weight of the water itself. How anything survives being crushed by the water itself. At the ocean's greatest depths, water pressure becomes almost incomprehensibly intense. At the very bottom of the Mariana Trench, pressure reaches over 1,000 times what we experience at the surface, equivalent to roughly the weight of 50 jumbo jets pressing down on a single square meter. Deep-sea creatures survive this pressure not by resisting it, but by matching it. Unlike a submarine, which must maintain an internal air-filled space at a different pressure than the crushing water outside, most deep-sea animals' bodies contain no significant air pockets at all. Their internal fluids sit at the same pressure as the surrounding water, so there's no dangerous pressure difference for the water to crush. This is a large part of why bringing a deep-sea fish rapidly to the surface, where pressure drops dramatically, is often fatal or severely damaging. The sudden pressure change can cause gases in the fish's tissues to expand violently, sometimes visibly deforming or rupturing the animal on the way up, an effect researchers call barotrauma. Additional adaptations help too. Deep-sea cell membranes are often built with a different chemical composition than shallow water species, keeping them flexible under intense pressure that would stiffen and damage an ordinary cell membrane, a subtle but essential piece of chemistry making life possible at depths that would instantly crush an unprotected human body. Nothing living down there is fighting the pressure at all. Every creature simply learned, over unthinkable stretches of time, to quietly agree with it instead. Every creature down there has learned to live with the pressure. Sound, remarkably, learned to use the ocean's structure to its own advantage. The secret highway that carries whale song for thousands of miles. At a specific depth range in most of the world's oceans, typically somewhere between 600 and 1,200 meters, depending on location, water temperature and pressure combine to create a layer where sound travels unusually efficiently, a phenomenon called the SOFAR channel, short for sound fixing and ranging. Within this layer, sound waves become naturally trapped, repeatedly refracting back toward the channel's center, rather than spreading upward or downward, and losing energy, allowing certain low-frequency sounds to travel extraordinary distances with remarkably little loss in intensity compared to how quickly sound normally fades with distance. Some whale species, particularly fin whales and blue whales, produce very low-frequency calls that appear to make direct use of this channel, and researchers have documented individual whale calls detected by hydrophones thousands of miles from their point of origin, a single sound produced by a single animal, potentially audible to another whale on nearly the opposite side of an entire ocean basin. This same channel was studied and used by naval researchers during the Cold War for long-range detection purposes, and continues to be used in modern oceanography and underwater tracking systems, a layer of physics that whales evidently had been quietly making use of for their own long-distance conversations, long before anyone else figured out it was there. Somewhere in the ocean tonight, a single low call might be crossing thousands of miles of open water, carried along an invisible channel built into the water itself. One voice, traveling further than most things on Earth ever get to. Sound can cross an entire ocean basin. Reaching the very bottom of that basin took humanity considerably longer to manage. The deepest point on Earth, and the handful of people who've seen it. The Challenger Deep, located within the Mariana Trench in the western Pacific Ocean, is the deepest known point in any of Earth's oceans, reaching down roughly 36,000 feet, deep enough that if Mount Everest were placed at the bottom, its peak would still sit over a mile beneath the surface. Humans first reached the Challenger Deep in 1960 when Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh descended in a specialized deep diving vessel called the Trieste, spending only about 20 minutes at the bottom before beginning their ascent, limited by the practical challenges of operating at such extreme depth and pressure. It would be more than 50 years before anyone returned. Filmmaker James Cameron completed a solo dive to the Challenger Deep in 2012, and since then, a small handful of additional expeditions using increasingly advanced submersible technology have made the descent, meaning even now, fewer people have visited the deepest point in the ocean than have walked on the surface of the moon. Despite the extreme conditions, these expeditions have still documented signs of life at the very bottom. Specialized microorganisms, small shrimp-like amphipods, and other creatures, confirming that even the single most extreme, crushing, lightless point in the entire ocean isn't entirely without something living in it. The deepest place on the only ocean planet we know of, and fewer human eyes have ever seen it directly than have looked back at Earth from the surface of another world entirely. A handful of people have seen the ocean's deepest point. As for the rest of the ocean floor, the truth is a little more humbling than most people expect. We've mapped more of the moon than our own ocean floor. It's a genuinely well-documented fact, cited often by oceanographers. A larger share of the surface of the moon has been mapped in detail than the floor of Earth's own ocean, despite the ocean floor being, quite literally, part of the same planet we live on. This isn't due to a lack of interest or effort. Mapping the seafloor is simply a fundamentally harder problem than mapping a dry, airless surface from orbit. Satellites can photograph the moon's surface directly, but ordinary light and radar can't penetrate more than a small distance into seawater, meaning most modern seafloor mapping instead relies on sonar, sending sound pulses down from a ship and measuring the time it takes for echoes to return, a slower and more resource-intensive process than orbital photography. International efforts like the Seabed 2030 project have worked to accelerate detailed seafloor mapping, combining data from research vessels, satellites measuring subtle gravitational variations caused by underwater terrain, and increasingly autonomous underwater vehicles capable of surveying remote stretches of ocean without a full research ship crew required. Even with this progress, significant portions of the seafloor remain mapped only at a very coarse resolution, or not at all in fine detail, meaning it's entirely plausible that geological features, and quite possibly entire species, remain completely undocumented on the very planet we call home. We've charted the surface of a world 240,000 miles away, in finer detail than the floor of the ocean sitting, right now, directly beneath wherever you happen to be tonight. So much of the floor remains unmapped. Some of what's already been found down there runs on a fuel source almost as strange as the vents themselves. The ecosystems that run on leaking gas. Separate from hydrothermal vents, certain areas of the ocean floor host a related but distinct kind of ecosystem called cold seeps, where methane and other hydrocarbons slowly leak up from beneath the seafloor without the intense heat associated with volcanic vent activity. Much like at hydrothermal vents, specialized bacteria at cold seeps use chemosynthesis to convert these seeping chemicals into usable energy, again forming the base of a food web entirely independent of sunlight, supporting tube worms, clams, and mussels adapted specifically to this particular chemical environment. In some cases, very close relatives of species also found at hydrothermal vents. Because cold seeps don't require the intense volcanic or tectonic activity that hydrothermal vents do, they can form and persist in a much wider range of locations across the ocean floor and tend to be far more stable and long-lived than vent ecosystems, some remaining active and supporting the same communities for thousands of years or more. In certain cold seep locations, methane combines with water under the specific pressure and temperature conditions found at depth to form methane hydrate, a strange ice-like solid that can sometimes be seen directly on the seafloor, occasionally even appearing to burn if ignited, despite being made substantially of frozen water. An entire quiet, patient community, built not around fire or sunlight, but around a slow, steady leak of gas escaping gently from the earth itself, undisturbed for longer than most civilizations have managed to last. Some things escape gently from the seafloor. One famous sight escapes our eyes entirely, a waterfall that isn't really a waterfall at all. The underwater waterfall that isn't actually waterfalling. Off the coast of Mauritius, in the Indian Ocean, aerial photographs have made a particular stretch of coastline famous for what appears, from above, to be a dramatic underwater waterfall, sand and silt seemingly cascading off a steep underwater shelf into the deep blue beyond. It's a genuinely striking optical illusion rather than a literal waterfall, since water obviously can't fall through more water the way it falls through air. What's actually happening is that ocean currents are carrying fine sand and silt across a natural underwater slope, where the seafloor drops away sharply into much deeper water. Seen from an aircraft or drone at just the right angle, this moving sand, combined with the sharp visual contrast between the shallow turquoise water and the much deeper, darker blue beyond the drop-off, creates a convincing visual impression of water itself plunging downward, an illusion striking enough that it's become one of the most photographed coastal features in the entire region. Similar sand and current effects, on a smaller and less dramatic scale, occur at underwater slopes in various locations around the world. Wherever the right combination of current, sediment, and steep terrain happens to line up, the ocean, in effect, quietly performing the same simple visual trick on a slightly smaller stage in far less famous places too. Nothing was actually falling at all, just sand, patiently drifting along a slope, and the ocean's own lighting doing the rest of the work to fool anyone looking down from above. Some waterfalls are only an illusion. Some lakes underwater, strangely enough, are entirely real. The lake sitting quietly at the bottom of the sea. In certain locations on the ocean floor, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico, something that sounds almost impossible actually occurs. A distinct, separate lake, complete with its own shoreline and surface, sitting entirely underwater at the bottom of the ocean. These brine pools form where extremely salty water, sometimes many times saltier than the surrounding seawater, seeps up from underground salt deposits. Because this hypersaline water is significantly denser than ordinary seawater, it doesn't mix and disperse the way fresh water would. Instead, it settles into low points on the seafloor, forming a distinct, separate body of water, complete with its own visible surface, sitting quietly underneath the ocean, like a lake resting at the bottom of another lake. The water within these brine pools is often so oxygen-poor and chemically toxic that fish and other typical marine life actively avoid it. Remarkably, researchers have documented the bodies of crabs and other creatures that wandered in and didn't survive the encounter, resting perfectly preserved along the pool's edges, a visible boundary between two very different worlds sharing the same patch of ocean floor. Despite this apparent hostility, specialized mussels and tube worms have been found thriving right along the pool's edges, adapted specifically to tolerate this narrow, strange, chemically extreme transition zone, a lake within a sea, hosting its own quiet, entirely separate rules. An entire lake, resting patiently at the bottom of the ocean, with its own shoreline, its own water, and its own strange, specific residents, one more corner of the sea genuinely stranger than most people ever get told about. A hidden lake rests quietly on the ocean floor. Far above it, the largest heart in the history of life on Earth keeps beating, slowly, in open water. The largest heart that has ever beaten. The blue whale is the largest animal known to have ever existed on Earth, larger, by mass, than even the biggest dinosaurs discovered in the fossil record, and its heart is correspondingly, almost incomprehensibly, enormous. Estimates place a blue whale's heart at roughly the size of a small car, weighing several hundred pounds, with a main blood vessel, the aorta, wide enough that a small child could, in principle, crawl through it, an organ built on a scale that pushes right up against the physical limits of what a functioning heart is even able to be. In 2019, researchers managed something remarkable, attaching sensors to a wild blue whale to record its heart rate directly during normal activity for the first time. They found the heart rate could drop as low as roughly 2 beats per minute during a deep dive, then spike dramatically to around 30 to 37 beats per minute at the surface as the whale rapidly reoxygenated its blood between dives. Researchers involved in the study noted that the blue whale's heart appears to be operating remarkably close to the upper size and workload limits physiologically possible for a beating heart at all, suggesting that, in a very real sense, evolution may have already built the largest and most extreme heart that this particular biological design could ever support. Somewhere in open water tonight, the largest heart that has ever beaten in the entire history of life on this planet is slowing down, patiently, to just 2 beats a minute, and then, just as patiently, beginning to speed back up again. The blue whale carries the largest heart in the ocean. One much smaller, much stranger fish carries one of the largest egg counts of any vertebrate alive. The giant fish, shaped like half of itself. The ocean sunfish, or mola mola, is the heaviest known bony fish in the world, with some individuals weighing over 2,000 pounds, and it has one of the strangest body shapes of any large fish, appearing, quite literally, as though it's simply missing its rear half. This unusual, flattened, almost disc-like body shape comes from a specialized fin structure called a clavus, which replaces the tail fin found on most other fish, giving the sunfish a distinctly truncated, rounded silhouette that looks, at a glance, like an enormous swimming head. Female ocean sunfish hold the record for the highest egg count of any known vertebrate animal on Earth. A single female has been estimated to carry as many as 300 million eggs at once. though the overwhelming majority never survive to adulthood, providing food for countless other ocean creatures along the way. Despite their enormous size, sunfish feed largely on jellyfish and other soft-bodied, low-calorie prey, meaning they must consume very large quantities simply to sustain their considerable bulk. And they're frequently seen basking sideways at the ocean's surface, a behavior researchers believe helps them warm back up after feeding dives into much colder, deeper water below. An enormous, gentle, oddly shaped giant drifting sideways near the surface to warm itself back up. One of the strangest looking animals in the entire ocean, built almost entirely around the simple, patient business of eating jellyfish and staying warm. The largest living space on Earth, still mostly a mystery. We opened tonight in the ocean's twilight zone, the mesopelagic layer between roughly 200 and 1,000 meters. And it's worth returning there briefly before we close, because of just how much of it remains genuinely unknown. By some scientific estimates, the twilight zone may contain the largest collective biomass of any habitat on Earth, far exceeding tropical rainforests, exceeding even the combined biomass of every human being alive. And yet, it remains one of the least explored, least understood regions on the entire planet, simply because it's so difficult and expensive to study directly. Researchers still don't have a confident estimate of how many species live there, how populations are genuinely distributed, or precisely how this layer influences the broader ocean food web and the planet's carbon cycle, since these small twilight zone creatures play a meaningful, still not fully quantified role in transporting carbon from the surface down into deeper water through their nightly migrations and their own natural life cycles. Modern research expeditions, using increasingly sophisticated submersibles, sonar, and genetic sampling techniques, continue to turn up new species and new behaviors in this middle layer of the ocean on a fairly regular basis, a quiet, steady reminder that even the parts of the ocean closest to sunlight still have far more to reveal than we've managed to learn so far. 28 small corners of a much larger, much quieter world tonight, and somewhere beneath every one of them, more is still waiting patiently in the dark for someone to finally come and take a proper look. That's where we'll leave it tonight. The line where daylight simply gives up, a migration larger than any on land, happening every single night. Most of the ocean's life making its own light. A small lure patiently dangled in the dark. A mate fused permanently out of sheer loneliness. A giant unfilmed for 100 years of cinema. An even larger giant still barely seen at all. A whale hunting entirely by sound in total darkness. Vents where life doesn't need the sun. Chimneys breathing black smoke into freezing water. A worm with no mouth, thriving anyway. A death that quietly feeds a community for decades. A jellyfish that can reverse its own aging. A fish with antifreeze instead of red blood. A creature with a fearsome name, living gently in the one place nothing else can. A fish that sees through the top of its own head. Deep-sea giants, simply given the time and room to grow. A fish that was supposed to have died out with the dinosaurs. An entire ocean agreeing quietly with its own impossible pressure. A voice carried thousands of miles down an invisible channel. A handful of people at the very deepest point on Earth. A moon mapped in finer detail than the floor beneath us. Ecosystems built on nothing but a slow, steady leak of gas. A waterfall that was never actually water falling at all. A lake resting quietly at the bottom of the sea. The largest heart that has ever beaten, slowing to 2 beats a minute. A giant, oddly shaped, warming itself sideways in the sun. and the largest living space on the entire planet, still, mostly, waiting to be understood. None of it needs solving tonight. It never did. If your eyes are already closed, that's exactly where they should be. And if they're still open, just a little, there's another quiet corner waiting right after this one, whenever you're ready. No rush, no sound, just sinking gently into whatever comes next.